Infusible inks are a great way to test the waters before jumping into sublimation, because with sublimation you need to be buying a new printer to convert over to a sublimation printer, and then there's all the different special papers and heat presses that you need to buy. And today I'm going to show you how to make these gorgeous mugs with some Cricut Infusible ink sheets and my Ninja air fryer. So go ahead and grab a cup of coffee, make yourself comfortable. Be sure to stay to the end so that you don't miss any of the important steps that we take throughout this video. And if you're new here, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming tutorials. Now, as we get started here, I have a mug that I got from Michaels. This was from their Make Market brand, which is their store brand. And it's a sublimation blank. It's fine. This mug works great. I personally like to get all of my sublimation blanks from ProWorld. And then I have the Cricut Infusible ink box here, which your boxes usually come with two different patterns in. One here is a solid black and one is the red and black check pattern, which I'll be using today. And then to make this all work without a mug press, I have found that these green silicone sleeve wraps work great. They just buckle together behind the handle and it holds the paper, whether it's the infusible ink sheets or a sublimation paper. It holds it super tight around the mug, which is key in having that pressure when you don't have a mug press to make this really work so that all that ink transfers onto your mug the best that it can. So along with some parchment paper and some heat safe tape, I am all ready to head over to Design Space and start designing my patterns for these mugs. Now, as you can see here, I already have one here with the ho ho ho, and I'm just going to walk through how I did this so that I cut out of the buffalo check pattern for on my mug. So I'm grabbing a square and pulling this down here. I'm going to go up to the top panel and unlock the measurements here so that I can put in what I need. And I found that a 9.5 wide and a 4-inch high for this particular mug was just the right size because I wanted it to go from handle to handle all the way around, but I also wanted it to be a little bit taller so that it would cover the entire surface of the mug. And on the first one up above, you can see I had rounded corners and I decided to keep them flat. I did not like the way the rounded one turned out as well, so here I'm going with the solid squared off corners. Now to get this ho 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 pattern in here, I went to my uploads where I had uploaded this from 𝗨𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 in the past. And if you guys haven't been over to 𝗨𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃, you definitely need to go check it out. I choose to use them instead of Cricut Access just because I have so many more options over there. But as you can see here it is, it tells me what the file was, and I'm just going to upload this to my canvas. As that is coming up here, you can see that there's all different colors, and that's fine. This is an SVG file, so I am not really worried about the colors, obviously, because I'm just going to be cutting this out of the rectangle. And what I need to do first here is I'm going to enlarge this ho 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 with the stars and make it the size that I want it to be in the middle of this mug because it's just going to wrap around the whole thing. Now remembering that the height is a little bit bigger than it needed to be because I want it to overlap the top and the bottom of the mug, I'm going to make sure I stay away from the top and bottom edges. Now I'm going to come up here and ungroup it because there are some stars in here that, you guys, they are super tiny, and I have used this file on a few different things with different materials like vinyl and the infusible inks, and they are just kind of a pain. They just don't come out very easily, so I'm just going to click on these and delete them because they're just not necessary. And then I'm going to be grabbing some of these other stars and just spacing them out a little bit more, and I'll duplicate one or two just to kind of fill in where I took out some of those little stars. Just play around with them and move them to where you think you would like them to go. Now I am going to remove that rectangle for a minute, and I'm going to highlight over this whole thing. And to do that, you just click and drag your mouse, and I'm going to attach it. Now it makes it all one color, and that is totally fine. I am going to be taking this from the middle of the rectangle. So as you can see here, by moving this back underneath here, I am going to then once again drag this whole thing over the top to grab both of these, the rectangle and the file, and I'm going to come up to the top and hit align and center. And that will just move that middle part there to the very center of this rectangle. I'm grabbing it one more time. I am going to slice this, but as you can see down below, the slice button is not highlighted. And in the past, that would be a problem because these are all still probably separate layers. As you can see on the side panel, there's a lot of layers, but we have this combine button here that I'm going to click on. And then what you can do is hit subtract. And you guys, this does the exact same thing as slice, only it actually takes everything away, so you don't have to drag off all your extra pieces. So if you ever have a project where you have lots of layers and you can't get it to slice, try out that subtract button and see if that doesn't do the trick for you. So now that we have this all ready to go, I am going to go up to the side panel here, and I am going to just hide the first one that I have because I do not need to cut both. And then here on our mat, remembering that this is the ink transfer sheets, works the same as iron-on or heat transfer vinyl, so remember to mirror this and then go down and hit continue. When your panel pops up, we are going to click on the Infusible ink transfer sheets. And if you don't have it bookmarked like I do, then you can go up here and you can search down to your iron-on options, and it will be down here kind of in the middle, and you just click on that. Or you can also go back up to the top and you can search all categories and click on iron-on and it will be in there, or you can just simply type in Infusible ink and it'll pop up. Now you get your reminder to mirror it and we are ready to go. Now heading over to the Cricut machine, I have my Infusible ink sheets here, and as you can see on the box, it has some temperature information for if you're using your Easy Press, but we are not going to be using that today, so just ignore that. And I'm going to be pulling out the red and black checked pattern transfer sheet here, and you can see that I've used this one already, so it's pretty small. But as you can see, the color here is a lot different than what it looks like on the box. And that is because when you heat it up and transfer it onto whatever you're putting it on, it will get a lot darker. So don't let that concern you, that is normal. Now, typically I would go ahead and cut this down closer to the size that I need, but because I've already used this sheet, it is pretty close to what I need. So I'm just gonna go and attach this to my cutting mat. With your mat, it's usually, in my opinion, better to have a stickier mat than not sticky. So I'm using the green mat here, and that's because the Cricut brand Infusible ink sheets come in a box all rolled up. So it's got a natural curve to it, which can be a little bit more difficult to work with. And I've actually ordered some other brands that come flat. So Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss the tutorial on where I compare the different brands. But anyways, you want to attach it as good as you can, and I typically use an unopened roll of vinyl or something to flatten it good, because you don't really want to handle it with your hands too much, as that can wear off some of the ink. So heading up here, putting it into the machine, it is all ready to go and to cut. And when you put your mat in, you want to make sure you get it underneath these rollers before you hit the arrow button for it to grab it. Sometimes people don't quite get it in there far enough and it won't actually grab the mat. And then there's all sorts of cutting issues and concerns why it's not working. So make sure you push that in so it's snug before you have the machine grab the mat. Now I'm going to let this do its job and then take it out. And as you can see, the cut line sort of here, it just did what it needed to. I typically find that the normal setting for Infusible ink works just fine. Go ahead and flip the mat over and peel the mat away from the ink sheets. And then we are going to start weeding this out after I trim off the extra around the edges here. That just makes it a little bit easier to work with. If you're getting any value out of today's tutorial, if you've been learning any tips or tricks on how to use Infusible ink, or how you might customize something for your own mugs, go ahead and hit that like button. But after I have this trimmed out, we are going to weed our Infusible ink sheets, which you don't actually weed it. So with this stuff, you actually want to crack it. And you will hear it when you do it, that the paper just kind of cracks away from that sticky carrier sheet that's on the bottom of this, and then you just peel it away. Now some of the little tiny stars in here, I do end up using my weeding tool. As you can see, I have that off to the side. Just because of the points on the stars, it's kind of hard to grab onto those with my fingers, because you really don't want to handle the ink sheets any more than you need to. Now obviously you have to touch it to pull the pieces out, but you just want to be careful when you do this. Maybe wash your hands beforehand so you don't have extra oil on them from lotion and such, or go ahead and put on some gloves just so that you're not handling it too much. We are gonna fly through this process here, as you can see how I am just kind of picking at these and pulling them out, and then we will get on to the next step. Hey guys, I just want to say thanks for hanging out with me today. Let me know down in the comments, where are you from? Have you ever used Infusible inks before, or is it one of those materials that you've always just been super hesitant to try out because it's different and it looks a little tricky to work with? But I promise you that this stuff is super easy to work with once you do it and figure it out. So I hope you are going to go out and get some of this, and let me know, what are you going to be using it on? Now that that is all finished, we are going to take our transfer sheets, the green silicone sleeve, and some parchment paper, and my heat safe tape. And taking the mug, I first had washed this down with rubbing alcohol just to make sure it was clean from fingerprints and debris. And then I am going to be taking my sheet here and using the lines on this grid self-healing mat. I'm going to just try to get this as even as possible, and then eyeball about where the center is with the middle ho 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 here, and line that up the best that I can. Now remembering that it was a little bit taller than the mug, so there will be a little bit that's hanging over the top and the bottom of the mug. And slowly bringing up one side and pressing it down, I'm going to take some heat safe tape and just tape this down, because even though it is sticky on that carrier sheet, It's not really sticky enough to hold it down tight against this mug. But remember, when you're placing your tape down, make sure you're not actually covering up any of the surface where the rest of this transfer sheet is going to lay, if that makes sense. So if it lays over the tape, then obviously it won't transfer onto the mug. And here I'm just going to continue to secure this down with my tape and get this as sealed as I can before moving on to the next step. Now, if you were going to be putting this in a mug press, this would probably be fine. You could tape down your edges a little bit more, like I'm going to be doing here next, but we are not using a mug press, so I am really going to tape this down really, really well so that there isn't any wiggle room here with this paper. Now that that is all secured onto the mug, I'm going to take my parchment paper and I'm going to wrap this around and underneath the handles, because I've done a mug in the past and it's actually a wine tumbler, as you can see here, and the silicone sleeve actually somehow left some green on the mug, which I'm not really sure why it did that. The whole mug was not completely covered. I had cut out pieces of the transfer sheets and I also used the markers on this one. So the whole thing wasn't covered with a protective sheet like this. So from then on, I just went and covered the whole thing good with parchment paper. And then I can take the sleeve here and wrap it around. So to do that, it's kind of like working with a belt buckle, to be honest. You just put this in the middle of the sleeve with the handle facing up, and you're going to take the bigger square part of the buckle first and then slide the skinnier part underneath the square and push it until it snaps into place. So if you can kind of see what I'm doing here, I just keep pushing it and you're going to think it's way too tight or it's not going to reach, but just keep going, you'll get it. And now this thing is super snug. You guys, this paper is not going anywhere. And this is the pressure that you really want when you are not using a mug press for doing your infusible ink sheets or even your sublimation papers. It just really makes a huge difference. And trust me, I've done it different ways. It's definitely the best. So now here is the air fryer. I am out in my garage, there's my dog, and you really want to be in a well-ventilated place, so I'll be opening up the garage door to do this, just because the ink lets off fumes. But you're going to want to set this to the air fry or air crisp and set it to 390 and then let it preheat. Then when it is ready, you can go ahead and open it up and just lay this on its side. You will be flipping this halfway through this process, and keep in mind that if you use any like air fryers or convection ovens for your crafting like this, do not use it for food after that. Always have something separate. Now here's my mistake. I set it for 9 minutes. Don't do that. It was supposed to be 6, so I came back at 6 minutes and flipped it. And then I pulled it out at 3 minutes because that was the wrong time. So 6 minutes is all you want. Flip it at 3. Use a tongs or your heat gloves if you have some. I couldn't find them, so there's my tongs. And after your 6 minutes is up, after flipping it one time, go ahead and take it out very carefully. Again, this was just in a 390-degree air fryer. And I'm just going to set this to the side on a grill rack and let this cool down completely. Now, there's 2 reasons for that. One, it's super hot, like that metal buckle, it's hot. You don't want to touch that. And second reason is with these inks, if you remove the paper too soon, you'll get something that's called a ghosting effect, which means your white areas, it's just going to leave like a shadow and some shading from it moving before it's completely set. So just let this sit for a few minutes until it's cooler to the touch and you can carefully remove this silicone sleeve from the mug. Now I walked away and let that cool down for a while, and it's time to open this up. So just press your two pieces of your buckle together and they'll pop open. And then it's time to try to remove all of this taped down paper and the transfer inks, sheets. And you guys, I added a lot of tape, but as you can see, just from looking at the bottom here, that red and black really transferred really well. So I was excited to see how this one turned out. And after getting through all of this tape, which it was a challenge, but I'd rather be safe than sorry and not have it snug down. You guys, look at this. I mean, that is super shiny. Look how dark that black and red check pattern came out and how white the white is because we waited and didn't take it off too soon, so there's no ghosting effect at all. And this turned out so well. And to think all I needed was an air fryer. So no need to buy a fancy mug press. There are other options on how to get the same results without all the fancy equipment. Now, if you need other ideas on how to use your Infusible ink sheets or markers, go ahead and watch one of these next videos.